caller to start out the Monday morning open phone session. It's Admiral Joe Sestak, hopes to be our next U.S. Senator. Good morning, Admiral Sestak. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, it's Joe, and thanks an awful lot for having me on.
Oh, I do appreciate it, Joe. Thanks for calling in. I didn't forget your name. I just went past it. So, and Joe McGranahan is here with us.
We have two Joes here this morning, then.
Good, Joe and Mark, thanks.
So we have an average Joe and we have an Admiral Joe. All right, so we are going to talk
that sounds right.
We're going to talk about what you did Friday, because the federal issues are what you're primarily focusing on. It sort of stood out that you were in Harrisburg helping with the budget impasse there. So tell us all about your activity.
Well, thanks. I arrived in the Capitol about 2 o'clock and unloaded a number of pallets of food, blankets, school supplies. And the federal funds, and I'm running for the United States Senate, that are provided for schools, also the homeless, women who are domestically abused, shelters get aid from federal funding. Those all cannot be, a large majority of them, passed through the state budget by law until a budget is passed. We're in our 6th month, and I just wanted to stand there for a while as the legislators, many of them, and federal officials and others had gone up to the Pennsylvania Society at the Waldorf Astoria and having, an enjoyable time, and I don't begrudge an enjoyable time. It's just that, I learned when I went out with the Marines as a young officer that the Marine officers ate last in the field, and they were the last to leave the field. They stayed there with the men. And I think that is exactly how it should be until this budget is done. We should be here getting it done.
The Pennsylvania Society, I've always wondered why they had to go to New York to have a meeting. It seemed sort of an oxymoron. But do you think that they should have postponed that and stayed on the job?
I think they could have had the Pennsylvania Society without any elected officials going. I think all elected officials should have stayed right here, across the board, and those vying even to be an elected official. If someone like Governor Rendell, who has passed and open, so to speak, as we say in the Navy, been there, done it, it's over, he should, let him go head up there. But I honestly believe that you are serving people, and those people, about 100, 125 that went through the line, they were grabbing things. And I don't mean meanly at all, it's just, hey, it's pretty tough out there. So I think they should have been all here.
The budget impasse, a lot of the money that they do pass through is federal money. Is that being held up too?
Yes, not all of it, but parts of it. So, for example, there is right now domestic abuse, probably about $5 million. Probably about $1 million of it has been passed through. It could legally, the rest could not. I was at a domestic abuse shelter about 2.5 months ago when it really came to light the impact it had. A woman spoke up about her own case, and then the executive director said, we're almost out of all of our reserves because we're getting no money any longer from the state. Here's a woman gets abused, just needs a place to stay, doesn't have a lot of income, and they can't help her. There's also money in there for public schools. I'm talking about pre-K programs. I'm talking about Head Start. There's also money in there for the homeless, including my fellow vets, and human resource services. These are all being denied federal funds that are meant to go right to the people for 6 months. So I just think lock yourself in a room, get it done.
If you had to assess blame, and I think there's enough to go around for everybody, where would you put it? Would you split 50-50, the governor and the Republican legislature, or would you divide it up a little differently than that?
I think it's exactly how you said it. There's more than enough to go all the way around. When I walked those 422 miles across the state, I said it's not about party. It's not about type. Certainly it's not about party in Pennsylvania Society, New York. But it is about people. If you are an elected official, somehow you should be willing to be held accountable for it not getting through. And don't blame the other side. That goes for Democrats and Republicans. We're in this together. So I would say, I think there's blame for both sides.
Now, you're running against, of course, a Republican United States Senator who has a reputation for reaching across the aisle and working with Democrats, notably Senator Manchin and even Senator Casey. Is it going to be hard for you to oppose him should you get the Democratic nomination?
Well, I tell everybody we yearn for the days of the liberal Rick Santorum. because, I mean, up until about a number of months ago, we actually had Pat Toomey 100% conservative rating by the American Conservative Union. And Rick Santorum was about 85%. Only in one instance, the background check, have I really noticed that Pat has reached across the aisle. For example, he even voted to shut down the government just about a month ago. He's the only senator who has voted against, or congressman, 10 straight veterans appropriations bills. He has voted to shut down the government 3 times. The only Republican or senator who's done that. No, I think that's why Rick Santorum said he was really too conservative for Pennsylvania.
Well, how about Katie McGinney? Where would she fall on the spectrum? She's running against you for the Democratic nomination.
Yeah, as I used to say as I was running by myself, look, anybody who wants to get in, get in. And, you know, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee went through 7 people they asked to get in against me because they didn't like my independence. I mean, as I said, it was 4 people. I wasn't for taking directions and control by I was going to say Damage Control Central. I meant the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee in D.C. They finally got someone in. That's okay. My focus is on one thing, and you brought it up. 1, people like those who are going through the lines there when our legislatures and those who want to be elected are up in New York. And number 2, Senator Toomey. And how, I mean, here's what I don't understand. How can he actually say that he had a bill to help children? Remember the background checks. And yet his bill called for a national registry of sex offenders that we had, but he voted to close that down. So you can't have it both ways. You either for people all the way or you're not.
All right, all the way back into Harrisburg, you got involved in distributing food and clothing and blankets, things like that last week in the steps of Harrisburg. Why get involved in that way? That's not a federal issue. Certainly it's almost a pathetic state issue, but you're running for federal office.
Yeah, you know, I told my staff months ago, this is a all elected officials effort. So, for example, mental health. I was in Harrisburg about 2 months ago, and I did a mental health event. Now, federal money and state money goes towards mental health. As you know, we have mental health parity finally in the United States because of the Affordable Care Act. I also did an event there on sickle cell, which it's a rare disease. It affects about 100,000 Americans, but pharmaceuticals don't invest, understandably, to fix it because even though it affects state people, there's not a profit in it. And I proposed a way that they could get a voucher to expedite their research through the FDA. But my point of these 2 examples is I was in the Capitol to emphasize these 2 issues because it's both the state issue, but it's a federal issue. And since federal funds go through the state and are not getting through, I felt, running for the United States Senate, I should be there to say, I'm with the people. I'm not up there in PA society today. Today you need to be with your people here in the Commonwealth.
Let's change directions for just a second. And as a United States Admiral or an Admiral in the United States Navy, you took an oath to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution and the American people, not a dissimilar oath to the one you would take if you were elected to the Senate. How do you stand on all the controversy today surrounding about what we need to do to protect America from outside terrorists coming in? I would suspect as a Democrat you're not in favor of Donald Trump's moratorium on all Muslim immigration, but what would you do to protect our borders, and what would you do to protect us from keeping...
I appreciate the question. I also headed the Navy's anti-terrorism unit shortly after I'd come out of the Pentagon on 9/11. About a half hour later, the plane went in, and people I knew were lost. I got assigned head of the Navy's anti-terrorism unit, went into Afghanistan for a short mission before I came out to take command of a battle group to do the bombing. So I feel very strongly about this issue, personally and professionally. And if I could take the issue which has just come up, I don't believe we have the right strategy towards ISIS in order to best protect America. And that is that we are treating ISIS still today as just an international terrorist organization. It is that, but it's much more, unfortunately. It is a state, an illegitimate state, but it controls population the size of Norway, territory the size of Belgium, $2 trillion in assets it owns with its oil fields. It gets $2 billion a year in income from the oil fields, from extortion, from fees, from wheat selling. We should do what we did in that tragic misadventure of Iraq, kick the legs out from under the state, destroy those oil fields, destroy those government bureaucracies. Look, we know where they are. We've never struck them. We gave the targets to France to start destroying the government agencies. Number two, take a coalition together, even those at times are not friendly to us at all, like Russia and Iran, and pivot and go have them do the groundwork by doing a principal compromise, unlike they're doing in Harrisburg on the budget and saying, Assad, he gets to stay around a little bit longer as long as you guys go with us against ISIS. And last, what happens the day after? I have yet to hear the administration say, what happens the day after? What's the end game? Look, we in the military understand and we're taught you don't take the first step in war until you know what the last step would be, because after we toppled Saddam Hussein, no one was ready for the day after, because when we break the caliphate, we will own that caliphate, and we weren't prepared for it in Iraq, and if we don't want to keep going back there, we better prepare to secure the peace, and I don't hear that at all.
All right, we'll give you an additional remark, a final comment on the air here this morning. Congressman Sestak.
I appreciate what you do. The fact that you'd have somebody come aboard and ask them tough questions like this ISIS one, I want to say to everybody, that's what I think is needed more of even today, the type of media that lets people that are out there and asking tough policy questions. Too often we get caught up in some inane comment somebody makes politically rather than worrying about people. At the end of the day, I learned in the Navy to be accountable to people, being ready to believe for cause if I wasn't able to accomplish what I said I did as captain of a ship. So more than anything, I'd like to be an accountable, independent person who is representative of everyone, even though I happen to be a Democrat. Thank you very much.
Oh, my gosh. Well, thank you. We really appreciate it. Come and visit us in person. You're long overdue for a visit back in our studios here at WKOK. We'd love to see you again.
Thank you. It's love to be there.
Good luck.
Have a great Pennsylvania Day, Mark and Joe. Bye-bye.
Good luck.